When I tell other writers that my hack for getting books written quickly is transcription, about half of them are intrigued. They want to try dictating a book for themselves, and about half of them are pretty horrified. So I know that most authors understand that transcription or dictation is a tool that can really help an author save time. But the thing is that many think that it's going to make for a worse book. So that's why I thought it would be a really cool idea in this episode of the How to Be an Author podcast for us to talk about why I think, as a writing coach, that dictation is not just a great tool when it comes to productivity, but more importantly, it can actually make your books and your writing career that much better. So in this episode, let's talk about why dictating a book can be such a valuable technique. And we're also going to talk about how to really do the best job when it comes to dictating your book so that you avoid some of the common pitfalls and that you really have the best possible experience with dictation. Because let me tell you that for me, it's really the secret weapon that enables me to publish multiple books in 1 year. And dictation is one of the big techniques that I talk about in my course, From Idea to Published in 6 months. Now, to actually write and publish a book in 6 months, you don't have to dictate your book at all, but it certainly can help. So we're going to be talking about the whys, the hows, and some of the things that you might not have considered. Get ready to maybe change your mind about the whole process of dictating a book.
If you're a writer dreaming of becoming a successful author, join me, writing coach Karena Akhavein, on the How to Be an Author podcast, your weekly source for writing information, inspiration, and motivation.
Welcome to the How to Be an Author podcast. I am writing coach Karena Akhavein. It is my passion in life to not only write fun books that are going to be well received by readers, but also to help authors like you go from aspiring to successful, or to help you through those pain points that block many writers and create points of resistance on the path to writing success. And one of the things that is really hard for people is, writing a book is time consuming. It is hard work. It's actually physically painful. We're going to be talking about that in just a second. So dictation is something that can be much more than a hack. It's actually a tool that can overcome some of these kind of universal problems that are part of the writer life. So let's talk about certain obvious reasons that many people agree on why dictating a book is a great technique. And I'm going to explain each of these things a little bit. If you haven't really thought about it that way yet, this might open your eyes. So of course, increased productivity is an obvious side effect of dictation and transcription. Dictation allows authors to produce text at so much of a faster pace compared to typing. No matter how fast you type, there is no way that you can type as fast as someone who's speaking. And furthermore, even if you were typing that fast, you would be exhausted. Your fingers would hurt. You would be clacking away. And I think that speaking your ideas really helps your ideas to flow more freely. And for example, I can get 5,000 words down in an hour. This is how I totally smash my NaNoWriMo goals every year. And this is how I manage when I'm running behind to get a lot done. And increased word count isn't just for NaNoWriMo. Getting those words down really helps the mindset of so many writers, because many of my writers that I see as a writing coach are super overwhelmed and they're feeling pretty negative because they're like, I've put in so much work and I literally have like 6,000 words in my book. And I know that I need around 90 to 100,000 and this seems insurmountable. I get you. It's impossible to edit a blank page. And when you don't have the momentum and you're trying to squeeze in every minute to write, but you're just not getting that much done, it can really impact your mindset in a negative way. So this is why dictating and getting down thousands of words in a single hour, this can really help you to feel like you've accomplished something. So I think that's really, really important. Having more output in a shorter amount of time is not just for bragging rights or anything like that. It's really actually something that will help you in the long run. And not only to produce more books in less time, which I think is also really important when it comes to sales, but definitely in terms of maintaining that momentum that is so crucial for writers. Definitely, I think that it's easier to overcome writer's block when you're dictating rather than when you're sitting in front of a blank page on the screen. I find that when you're speaking, you're stimulating thoughts and ideas. You're getting past these creative obstacles. Even more so for me as an ADHD writer, I can multitask and I can stop hyper-focusing on the negative stuff, and I can do my writing while I'm doing something that basically helps to focus me. So for example, I've talked before about how I will dictate when I'm driving along like a straight highway. That, for some weird reason, has a way of focusing my energy like nothing else. I will literally take myself from Santa Barbara, where I live, to Malibu. And people think, oh my God, how do you have time to go like chill out in Malibu when you're supposed to be writing a book? Well, the secret is that's when I get my best writing done. I got like almost 10,000 words done the other day when I drove to and from Malibu. I mean, that's massive, massive productivity. And it's great because you get to multitask. So you can write while you're walking, while you're exercising. I mean, I think your pacing might be a little different, but even, maybe when you're doing the dishes or maybe when you're sewing something or knitting something. So this really helps you to utilize your time more efficiently and to feel like you're doing other things in life rather than sitting in front of the computer. And also, here's really important. Writing hurts. This is what I said, your fingers, carpal tunnel syndrome. And also, just for me, if I'm sitting at my computer all day, my neck gets so painful. My shoulders get so tense. And, many of us have disabilities or have, accessibility issues. And dictation provides a method for more authors to be able to write. If you have a physical disability or a challenge, this really helps a wider range of voices to be heard, literally. If you can dictate your work, it helps to ease that physical discomfort or that challenge of writing. And I think this is a great way of promoting inclusivity in the writing world. We can't all be typing. Some of us, our brain doesn't even work that way. Some of us have, dyspraxia, and it's hard for us to type fast. And if you're typing like a few hundred words an hour, well, that's fine, but it's not as productive as you could be. So definitely think about the fact that, that can help. And some writers will tell me, no, but I have an accent and, I can't be understood. Your phone learns your accent. I've actually tested my phone using several accents and, doing all this stuff. And in fact, your phone starts to understand you a little bit more, and it's not going to be perfect. And actually, the fact that it does make mistakes when you're dictating is actually beneficial. We're going to be talking about that in a second, but definitely dictation can be so much more ergonomic and comfortable. You can write while chilling out on the couch with your cat or your dog. I mean, how fun is that? So I think that that's really great. Another thing that most people can agree on is that using dictation actually captures those oral storytelling skills. And honestly, oral storytelling is the oldest method of storytelling. The spoken word is engaging, it's dynamic, and it's a great way of getting your stories out there. Like, I think that our ancestral memories, that genetic memory of what makes a good story, really comes out when you're storytelling verbally rather than writing it. So capturing some of that magic via dictation can be really, really wonderful. And granted, you're going to end up editing. And again, that's a good thing, but this is getting some of that immediacy on the page. That's what I think it is that dictation creates this direct, immediate link between your thoughts and the written word. You're bypassing that mechanical process of typing or even writing by hand. And this is so much more efficient to have more immediate ideas. I think that that's really, really cool. So I think we can all agree that, in terms of convenience, comfort, productivity, and maybe that immediacy and that freshness, dictating your book is a great choice. But It can also really truly make your book better in several ways. So let's talk about how that happens. The first thing that I think is that dictating your book might give you a clearer structure and a stronger plot. You can dictate scene by scene for sure, but it's also good to have some planning. And yes, we all write outlines, or at least I've tried to convince many of you to write outlines, but a little planning goes a long way when you're recording yourself, right? If you don't have some idea of what you're going to talk about, the dictation's not going to work so well. So I find that when I'm dictating a book, my book ends up getting a way clearer structure and better pacing because again, it's that immediacy of the storytelling. And I think that that really, really helps. I've done a few books, using dictation and readers will say, wow, it really gallops along. And I think that that's a direct result of how I dictated it. There's also this enhanced natural conversational tone, and that extends not only to, kind of the rhythm, the cadence, the nuance of your book and gives you that more authentic writer voice, but also it really helps you with dialogue. When you're speaking the dialogue, you're not going to be making the same mistakes that many authors make when they're writing dialogue. And I do have some episodes that take a deeper dive into dialogue, and you can look for those. But speaking your dialogue really helps to make it more realistic, more engaging. And really, it ensures that each one of your characters is going to have a really distinct voice and manner of speaking because you're almost acting it out. And I think it really, really helps, especially when you're dictating. I sometimes don't use all the dialogue tags and then I can go back and I can do that. Again, the editing really, really helps. But I think that this helps to not have this stilted artificial dialogue. Another thing that I think that dictation really helps with is in my sensory details and my descriptions. Because when I record something, I'll often kind of try to, if I'm not driving, I'll close my eyes to imagine what I see around me in the scene. So it's very cinematic, right? When you're typing, again, there's that interruption. There's the mechanical process lying between your vision of what it is and what ends up on the page. But I feel that when I'm dictating, I can really focus on those vivid descriptions, on those sensory details. I can speak the descriptions aloud, kind of as if I was watching a movie and trying to explain to somebody what's happening, like what's the sounds, what's the smells, what are the sights and textures. And really, I think that this results in writing that is so much more immersive and evocative. That is a really great payoff. I also think that the emotional depth gets so improved with dictation. I'm sure you found that when you're talking about your emotions to a friend or, trying to describe how you felt, it kind of feels much more raw, real, authentic, and original than when you try to express that in writing. It's just that much more resonant when you're speaking someone's emotions. You have a tendency to go into more detail. Like if you're talking to your friend about your breakup, for example, you're going to be like, wow, I never knew, what was happening and it hit me really hard. And, when I think about this, you're not censoring yourself so much. When you're writing it, you're going to be a lot more analytical. And that can be great to be analytical. Of course, you can kind of make the description even stronger with some great imagery and metaphor. But first, why don't you tap into that emotional depth without censoring yourself? Because dictating is almost like brainstorming, right? It's a more fluid thought process. Your ideas are flowing. It's stimulating your creativity. You're bypassing that self-censorship and you're more spontaneous, more authentic. And I think that that's pretty exciting because it really gives you that more immediate prose that so many authors try to recreate, but it would be so easy to just create it in the first place by dictating. Now, I talked about how transcribing actually is great because you do have to edit the book. And this, to me, editing something that you have transcribed or dictated is much more a form of self-editing than if you had typed it out Because there's this weird assumption when you've typed it out that you've put in so much work and that you probably got it right the first time and everything else. And nothing could be further from the truth. You did not get it right the first time. But when you dictated it, you don't have this ego involved because you're like, oh, my silly phone didn't understand me again. So that really helps you to identify areas for improvement, refine the sentences, make the necessary revisions, choose the stronger word. It really leads to stronger writing overall, because you can, for me, what I do is that I'm going to go back and I'll try to revise it more immediately after I read it or transcribed it, because you kind of forget what you meant. So you want to go back and do a first pass at self-editing sooner rather than later. But then when you go back, you still have that distance, because sometimes when I speak, I forget half the stuff I said. And so I'm not jumping over the things that you usually skip when you're self-editing. You're going to be a lot more objective, I think. So I think that's a really interesting thing about that whole, transcription thing, especially when you're having to go line by line and fixing, punctuation and things like that. Well, you're actually going to be paying more attention because there's not the assumption that you typed it right. So I think that's really important. And by the way, next week, we're going to be talking about self-editing and all these hacks to make, your book better as you self-edit, that I think is going to be really, really useful. And again, self-editing, massive part of my course From Idea to Published in 6 months. Self-editing has a place. Professional editing has a place. And in my course, I basically really lead you through how to get those things done in the right amount of time. So that's really, really important. Okay, so now let's talk about how to get the best result out of dictating your book. And for you Writing Coach on Demand members, you're going to have even more tips on how to do this. But if you're not a Writing Coach on Demand person yet, you absolutely can sign up, and that gives you access to 15 minutes of office hours each week where you can kind of be held accountable and have any burning questions answered by me, your writing coach, one-on-one. And also you're going to have all these bonus materials that are really going to help you as you move along. And for now, I still have the special deal where if you do From Idea to Publish in 6 months, you get Writing Coach on Demand for free for 6 months as well, which is an awesome, awesome deal. It's a great way to definitely get your writing dreams to come true this year in 6 months. Okay, so let's talk about the best results you're going to get out of dictation. What are the tips that I have for you as an author who does this all the time? Number one, definitely find the right environment. Now, I talked about multitasking, and some things help when you're multitasking, right? Like maybe if you're knitting and you're in your comfort zone, that's cool. Or if you're driving, that can really help too. But you want the environment to be quiet and comfortable enough so that you can kind of have that medium level of focus. And this means minimizing background noise, minimizing interruptions. Like I find that I absolutely cannot dictate in front of anyone. It's way too embarrassing and weird. So you really want to be able to maintain that concentration and that productivity. Once you're interrupted, it takes a while to get back into the zone. So definitely I would say even sitting in your car is a great way to do this, but sitting in your living room and telling your family, hey, for the next hour, the living room's mine, all of you stay away. That really helps. Now, to get a clear and accurate recording, some people will say, oh, you need a really good quality microphone. You know what a good quality microphone is? Your phone or your iPad. As long as they're less than 5 years old, this is probably going to really help you as long as you speak pretty clearly. And yeah, it's going to miss some stuff. Big deal. I actually think it's good if it misses stuff because it forces you to actually improve those sections. But definitely having a phone or an iPad, for me, that's more than enough. So that's pretty good. And you can use your earbuds, to block out some of the other noise and hear better. All of that stuff is fine. But definitely, I would say that recording equipment, not really a concern. Now, I talked about having an accent or your phone doesn't understand you. you need to practice speaking clearly and relatively concisely. And also what's fun is practice enunciating and use a consistent speaking pace. Don't mumble, don't rush through your sentences, but also use the expression or the emotion that you're trying to convey. And if you speak your sentences properly, there's a higher chance that your transcription program will understand where to put the periods and the question marks and the exclamation marks. So that's really, really helpful, because if you're kind of mumbling or talking without emotion, there's a good chance that that program's not going to get it. And some of the programs, you have to speak the punctuation. And now I've learned that I really like the programs where you don't have to do that, because when you speak the punctuation, again, I feel like you're putting this barrier between yourself and the immediacy of your story. So definitely practice that enunciation. This has a really great side effect, that is that you start to speak a lot more clearly. And that means that if you decided that you wanted an author podcast like this one, or if you decided that you wanted to record your own audiobook, these are all things that you're going to get better at. I think that as authors, using our voice, not just on paper, but using our voice in other media, is a great opportunity to get to reach more audiences. So I really think that this thing really does develop new skills and new qualities in your voice and in your speech. So definitely practice, practice, practice. It's necessary and totally worth it. I think it's a great idea to establish a dictation routine to develop that rhythm and that habit. But again, this is kind of one of those things, like people are like, oh, you have to write every day at exactly so-and-so time. And it's hilarious because I have heard that piece of advice so many times. Like almost everyone's like, you have to develop a writing routine. And sure, that works for some people, but for some people, it just makes you guilty. I just think, maintain the consistency. I say maintain the momentum. That's crucial. Make it a regular part of your process. But if you don't get to do it every day and you only do it when you're driving to XYZ place, like a couple times a week, that works too. That's okay. And also know that just because you're dictating some parts of your book is not necessary to dictate the whole book, even though I think it helps to maintain that equal tone. But sometimes there's some scenes where you have to be really careful and you have to kind of plan it out, a little bit more in detail, and that's fine too. But I do think that outlining and organizing in advance really goes a long way. Having a clear structure, having the organization in mind really helps you to stay focused, and it guides your dictation. It ensures that your story is cohesive and well structured. And also, I like to make sure that when I'm recording, I'll usually record scene by scene. So that means that I start recording at the beginning of the scene and I end at the end of the scene. And that kind of forces me to start and end my scenes really strong, which I think is a great thing, right? You start with a hook and then you end with either a mini cliffhanger or something having been resolved or decided, and this moves your plot inexorably forward. I was talking about how dictation can definitely help with that pacing and that tension throughout. That's one of the ways it does it. And definitely, I would say that, that embracing the editing soon after you've transcribed is pretty important. And then some of you are probably wondering, like, okay, I get the dictation part. How does it go from my spoken word to words on the page? There's a bunch of software and a bunch of apps for that. They can transcribe your dictation either directly, or you can upload the audio and you can do that, right? You can get some software that does it as well. And it's really, really useful. The thing that I use is I use Microsoft 365. So I just record in my notes, and then I upload that to the Microsoft 365 Word document, and then I just import it into my documents with text only. Super easy. And it takes time to adjust to this. It takes time to adapt. But, if you think that it's going to be a waste of time learning how to do this, I say that the time you save as you dictate your book is so massive that you should at least consider it. I think that it can definitely be your secret weapon that gets you to that goal of writing more books, publishing more books this year, next year, and beyond without totally going nuts. So I hope this was a really helpful episode. I think for me, if I had known this earlier on in my writing career, I think things would have been very, very different. But now that I know it, I can tell you that it's something that definitely helps me every single day. So I would love to hear how it works out for you. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me, ping me, let me know how that whole method works for you. And I'll look forward to talking with you next time and being with you next time on the How to Be an Author podcast when we talk about editing and troubleshooting in books to correct those mistakes that kind of drag our book down. It's going to be a great episode as well. So if you want to sign up for the Writing Coach on Demand in the meantime so that you can get all those bonus materials and start chatting with me, please do that. I would love to have you. Thanks again. Talk to you next time.
If you have any pressing writing-related questions or would like to be featured on the How to Be an Author podcast, please feel free to reach out on my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com.